What we've seen in the past 24 hours has been completely surreal. People crossing the border, picking up their entire lives and coming to freedom. The looks of uncertainty with a single suitcase, a mother, a daughter, a granddaughter coming across just to flee the war right now.
These are people who are leaving a war zone, don't know whether they're leaving for 2 weeks or for the rest of their lives.
It's women and children coming through, and this represents families that have been ripped apart and have left people behind.
What I've seen has been beyond inspiring. The numbers of volunteers that are here to help, the quiet, organized way in which people are being handled.
The services, the minute they walk over the border, are enormous. They're housing all these refugees in huge empty malls and hotels and Airbnbs. It's just overwhelming.
The volunteers are making all of this happen.
I think the takeaway for me is just the incredible suffering going on, and the fact that we as a Jewish community are here via the JDC, via the Jewish Agency, being able to take care of them, and this is remarkable.
That's a powerful testament to the work of Jewish federations and our overseas partners, from North American Federation leaders who went to the Ukraine border area in the past 2 weeks. There, they gained a better understanding of the crisis and the essential work federations are supporting to save lives. Today, we want to ensure that you better understand what your local federation has been doing and raising funds for to save lives in the face of this humanitarian catastrophe. I'm Stephen Schulman, CEO of Jewish Federations Canada, UIA, which ensures that dollars raised by federations and smaller communities remains under Canadian direction and control so that we can ensure the best possible use of funds overseas to help in this crisis and so many others. This is a joint webcast produced by Jewish Federations Canada, UIA, and UJA Federation of Greater Toronto, with the participation of federations across Canada. This truly reflects the work of each federation. Jewish federations have a unique role to best address the most pressing needs of the Jewish community locally, as has been evident over the past 2 years with the pandemic, and the most pressing needs of the Jewish people globally, as evidenced by this crisis in Ukraine. Federations do that by partnering with the entire Jewish people. On the point of partnerships, before we begin, there was a deadly terrorist attack in Beersheba yesterday. Beersheba is the partnership region of Montreal Federation CJA. All of us across Canada pray for a speedy and full recovery for those injured, and our thoughts and prayers are with the families of those who were taken by this violence. May their memories be for a blessing. Today's program is all about the power of federations partnerships around the world. We'll connect how the actions of our local Canadian Jewish federations and the generosity and vision of community members across the country are supporting this work. We'll also focus on the specific work of our partners, affecting tens of thousands and counting. We will also be enlightened as to the geopolitical matters relating to the crisis. To date, Jewish federations and communities in the Canadian Federation system, from coast to coast, have raised more than $7.2 million to support the work of our partners, the Jewish Agency for Israel, and the Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, known as the JDC. This is a testament to the responsibility the Canadian Jewish community feels for Jews around the world, wherever they may be, and to the effectiveness of federations and our partners. Thanks to all, and there is more work to do. On Monday, Toronto and the Canadian Jewish community lost Julia Kashitsky, a blessed memory. Julia personified leadership in response to Jewish crises and opportunity, locally in her home, Toronto, in Canada, in Israel, and across the Jewish world. Julia would be at the front of the line, leading by example in this crisis, as she did for so many over decades, including her leadership role in Operation Exodus, which brought 1 million Jews from the former Soviet Union to Israel. At synagogue yesterday, a rabbi I was chatting with perfectly described Julia as regal. Julia was regal, and she lifted every person she spoke with, every meeting she was at, and every fundraising and relief effort she led to that same regal level. We already miss Julia dearly, but the legacy of her words and actions will continue to inspire us. In 1991, at a Federation CJA event in Montreal, in the midst of Operation Exodus, Julia said something that could have just as easily been said today, relating to our Canadian and global Jewish community's response to the crisis in Ukraine. Julia said, and I quote, "The lesson of Jewish history is that ordinary people, like you and me, can achieve miracles. If the inspiration is there, we can rise above any limitation we have set ourselves, and we can help to fashion the hopes and dreams of our Jewish people. We can help decide their future. May Julia's family be comforted among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, and may we all be inspired to action by Julia's words and deeds in response to the challenges of this crisis and others to come." To start our program, we have Adam Minsky, President and CEO of UJA Federation of Greater Toronto, to be followed by Linda Frum, Chair of the Board for UJA Federation of Greater Toronto, who you saw in the opening video, both having returned recently from the Poland-Ukraine border. Adam.
Thanks, Stephen, and good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to share just very briefly 3 ideas that I was left with upon returning to Toronto at the end of last week from Poland. The first idea is that the scope and scale of the emergency that we experienced is far beyond what we expected. Over the 5 years of the Syrian civil war, there was a refugee crisis of 2 million refugees that came to Europe over those 5 years. In 15 days, there have been 2 million refugees from the Ukraine that have entered Poland, and the number continues to rise, with another million going to the neighboring countries of Moldova, Romania, and Hungary. This is on a scale that is truly the greatest refugee crisis in Europe since the Second World War, and was far beyond what we expected. But most surprisingly, and what's not getting a lot of attention, we understood when we were there after meeting with the chief rabbi of Russia that this is not just a crisis that is limited to the Jews of the Ukraine and to Ukrainians in general. There is also a crisis emerging in Russia in parallel to it. Our amazing organizations that we support and you'll hear from today at the Jewish Agency for Israel and the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, everywhere you go near the border and in centers around Warsaw, we saw signs with a hotline number for Jews to be able to call to get assistance from those organizations. I learned today that the hotline manned by the Jewish Agency out of Israel, they've had already in the last 4 weeks, 28,000 calls from Ukrainian Jews asking for help. But at the same time, they've had 29,000 more from Russian Jews who are terrified that the Iron Curtain is about to come down on them, and they are looking to leave Russia. This is a crisis that is far beyond what we expected. The second idea that was really powerful to me and to Linda, who I was traveling with, was that precisely at this moment, we are relying on our global Jewish 911 partners which as a federation system we've been investing in for years. And while I always appreciated that their presence on the ground before the crisis was going to enable them to do amazing things, what we witnessed firsthand was that the expertise and the abilities that they have acquired in years and years of operating in the Ukraine, in Russia, in Poland, in the surrounding region, enables them to do miraculous things, to turn on a dime, whether it's creating an expedited process for Aliyah so that people are able to flee the conflict zone in record time, whether it's about arranging for health insurance so that every new immigrant to Israel is provided with the health insurance immediately that they need since they fled homes that they're not able to go back to. The third idea that I want to share with you is that this isn't a short-term crisis. It has longer-term implications, even if the conflict was to end very soon. You know, I will never forget the moment standing at the Polish-Ukrainian border with Linda. I'm watching literally a sea of women and children coming into the country. What was so remarkable about it was that you would expect to hear crying and really a lot of noise coming from so many people crossing in after such a difficult journey. I was taken aback by how deafeningly silent things were. The shock, the trauma that people have experienced, the wait at the border on the Ukrainian side for extended periods of time in the cold has produced a circumstance where there are no tears left. People are exhausted, they need our help. And the work that our partner organizations are doing is truly miraculous. And with that, I'll turn it over to Linda to give you some more context, and then you'll hear from our partners directly.
Thank you, Adam. And I just simply want to say to everyone that it was such a privilege for me to travel with Adam and to be at the Ukrainian-Polish border, knowing that I was representing the broader Canadian Jewish community, knowing how generous you on this call have been and how generous our community has been to date and how much more people will still do because there's so much more help that's required. Adam described some of the things we saw and some of the visits we made. One thing that made me proud and would make you proud is one of the first stops was to the Novotel hotel in Warsaw, where there is now a temporary Israeli consulate, and refugees were being brought there so that they could have passports issued, you know, almost in real time, you know, within a day or two, and they were receiving health insurance, as Adam mentioned, and they were being put on planes. Potentially, we were meeting them, and they were going to be flying to Israel the very next day. And I don't believe there's any other country in the world that is responding with such speed and such efficiency and such compassion. And it was really a wonderful thing to see. But having said that, Adam and I had the opportunity to speak to refugees in different parts of Poland. And we, of course, always asked them what their plans were. And what's really haunted me when I think about it is how many of them would say to us that they didn't know their plans and that they were hoping to go home soon. And I think that that is something that we're going to have to contend with in the months and potentially years ahead, is that unlike other situations, this is a case where families have been split up, they're not together, and they're not ready to make a commitment to move to Israel or move to Canada. They're waiting and seeing, and they're fervently hoping that they can go back to Ukraine. And we hope that they can, but we don't know if they will be able to. And so the situation is very fluid, and it's a very long-term situation that we here in Canada who want to help, we will need to be here for the long haul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam and Linda, for sharing that, because you're really putting the audience, all of us, where you were a couple of weeks ago, the greater understanding of the role of the federations across the country, but also what you saw as Canadians with your own eyes. So thank you very much. And Adam, you referred, and Linda, you referred to the work of our partners. And one of our partners that we're highlighting is the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. It's a key overseas partner of federations across Canada and does incredible work. And in fact, doing incredible work with response to this crisis. And we'd like to show you just a very short video as a lead-in, as an example of their work.
Все планировали, что все хорошо, растим детей. Где дети будут учиться, думали, где никто не ожидал такого, не ожидал.
Война, началась война, начали обстрелы. Некуда деваться.
У нас все время включались тревоги, сигнал тревоги. Каждый раз мы сидим в коридоре. Извините. Прячемся в коридоре, потому что бомбоубежище непригодно у нас. Получается, там непригодно, чтобы прятаться. Сказали, что если спуститься в подвал, нас может завалить. Поэтому мы в коридоре оборудовали, там сидим все время в квартире.
Мы никогда не могли это представить. Начали бомбить, конечно.
Кэссет нам помогли, Кэссет выехать. Нам сообщили по телефону сообщение, что кто хочет выехать с детьми, спасти семью. Тут в такое-то время, что пришли на вокзал и на автобусах мы поехали в Молдавию.
Пока мы здесь, нам кормят. Все есть, комната, вот. Не могу сейчас собраться.
We're fortunate to be joined by Gideon Hersher and Alex Sklar from the Joint Distribution Committee, JDC. Gideon is the interim co-executive director for global resource development. His responsibilities have extended as far as Africa, where he oversaw a number of JDC's operations in Ethiopia and played a central role in the establishment of a youth village in Rwanda, built to serve as an Israel-inspired orphan care model for over 1.2 million orphans as survivors of the Rwandan genocide in 1994. And one of Gideon's most notable accomplishments includes the development of the nationwide PACT, Parents and Children Together, Early Childhood Initiative for Ethiopian Israeli Families. PACT is currently operating in 14 cities across Israel, reaching over 10,000 Ethiopian Israelis from birth to age 10. And Alex Sklar spent her early childhood in Russia and made Aliyah to Israel at the age of 8. Today, Alex serves as JDC's Director of Strategic Partnerships and is managing the Second Century campaign, which will ensure JDC's ability to respond to global needs in the future. In fact, during her own work, Alex discovered that her own family members in Ukraine and Siberia had been and are still receiving life-sustaining assistance from JDC. So Gideon, let's start with you.
Thank you, Stephen. My opening thought is immediately returned to the video we just saw, where if you were looking at the faces of the people on the screen, you saw sadness, terror. And I just want to share an additional feeling that I am overwhelmed with at this moment, which is pride. It's an honor to serve with you. And that is exactly what we are doing right now. We are serving together in order to sustain and amplify the mission of UIA. The conversation that we're having today did not actually start today. It started generations ago, when an understanding was shared and cemented that we are indeed responsible for Jews everywhere, no matter where they are. And to that end, it was UIA and continues to be UIA that provides the critical funding ongoing year after year. Each of your federations in Canada and their annual campaigns, they are the sustenance for the day-to-day work that we do. And if we did not have that history together, we would not be having this conversation right now. We would be scrambling. It would be all the more chaotic, but it's not the case. We were as prepared as one can be for the horrific reality that is war, humiliation, loss, displacement. And so I just want to spend the next 2 minutes telling you 3 things that you are doing. And I want you to hear them and take them home with you and share them at your Shabbos tables. The first is evacuation. The JDC, together with you in the Ukraine, provides humanitarian aid to over 40,000 elderly Jews. Almost half of them are Holocaust survivors. That means that we have a database of individuals. We know when they last took their medications. We know their addresses. We also know where their children live. And we also know how challenging it is to evacuate an elderly person that is frail as it is. And that is something that we continue to be committed to doing. The second thing is the transportation, which is extremely precarious from wherever they may be located, the people that we care about, and the nearest border. And the third, obviously, is that embrace that I think was mentioned by Adam and Linda, that embrace when a refugee understands that they are actually no longer alone on this journey. And it is you that stand together with us to catch their fall, provide them with the nourishment and the hydration and the security that they need to move on. And today we have our staff manning 11 border crossings across Poland, Romania, Moldova, and Hungary. We are currently accommodating over 11,000 refugees who have nowhere else to turn to. We are their lifeline. And it's an honor to be able to provide this on your behalf and with your partnership. I will end with one sentiment. We know that Passover is coming up in a few weeks, and we know the story of Exodus. This year, I believe that we can look in the mirror and say to ourselves, I was there. I stood up. I was counted. I supported my federation. I supported UIA. And so when your grandchildren ask you, where were you when that horrific war took place? Your answer is going to be crystal clear. I stood shoulder to shoulder, made sure that our brethren, our sisters and brothers, many of whom we don't know, are safe and supported. And on behalf of the JDC and the people that we serve, thank you. I want to hand the virtual microphone over to my friend and my colleague who's tuning in this evening from Warsaw, Alex Szklar. You heard that Stephen mentioned a bit about her personal story that I hope she will be willing to share to the extent she's emotionally able to at this point, and also share a bit about what you have seen on the work that UIA is supporting over the last couple of days.
Thanks, Gideon. So before I jump in, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Toda Rabba, for inviting me today, for your partnership, for your friendship, for standing for JDC, for enabling the work we do together around the globe. As you heard, aside from my formal hat with JDC, this is a very personal matter to me. My family left the former Soviet Union 30 years ago as refugees, and we went to Israel via Hungary, where we got shelter for a few days before we continued to Israel with the help of the Jewish Agency. Being there this week was both surreal and inspiring. And I really thank you all, as Gideon said, standing shoulder to shoulder with my family when we needed you, and for standing shoulder to shoulder with the thousands of Jews and refugees who are facing a crisis today. I'm speaking to you from Warsaw today after 4 really intense days where my colleague and I visited 4 different countries and borders in Moldova, in Hungary, in Romania, and today in Poland. As you saw in the video, the situation is tragic and the stories are heartbreaking. We heard about trauma, people who suffer from constant shelling, sirens, curfews, and tanks surrounding their buildings. We heard about buildings that are shaking so hard that people fall off their beds. Hours without electricity and the constant fear and stress that just never ends. We met families that spent 2 weeks hiding in shelters that didn't have enough space for them to lay down, so they had to stand up during the day and during the night. We saw elderly people who traveled for 7 days to get from Eastern Ukraine to reach Moldova or Romania, and people who are crossing the border with holding a child in one hand and a plastic bag in the other. And that's it, one plastic bag. Some people had less than 15 minutes to get ready, and had to flee with their pajamas or a bathrobe. They left everything behind, their homes, their jobs, their dreams, their husbands, their fathers, and their brothers. We met a woman who made it to the border with a baby and her father, with the hope that the three of them will cross together. But the father is 59 years old, and they didn't let him in. He ended up making his way back to Eastern Ukraine alone, and she ended up crossing the border with her baby alone. At the train station in Hungary, we met a family of 7 who went from Ukraine to Moldova, then to Romania, then to Hungary, and now they're thinking about continuing to Germany, going from one unknown to another unknown. And while there are so many unknowns, probably more questions than answers at this stage, there is one thing we know for sure. They're being met and taken care of by the Jewish community at every single stop of their journey. From the first JDC text message they get in Ukraine with the number of the hotline they could call and get help or just advice or somebody to talk to assistance with evacuation, to their first few hours on the border where they're greeted with a big sign that says, Shalom. When you get off the train in Budapest, that is the first thing you see, a big blue JDC sign that says Shalom. Just imagine this feeling. When you cross the border in Siret in Romania, the first thing that you see is a big blue tent that says in Hebrew, Bruchim Habayim. People proceed to the stand, they're greeted with a big hug, with a hot soup, with some hot tea, clothing, hygiene products, and anything they may need for the first few hours to just get respite and digest what happened. To the transportation that's provided to them later, to the days or weeks they need accommodations, help, psychological support, and help with what the next steps may look like. But I do want to say something that stood out to me in every single place we visited. It wasn't just the what and the type of service we provide, but it was the how. Seeing that these people are not what their immigrant status is, or as refugees, which is what we refer to them. They're teachers, they're doctors, they're artists, they're book lovers, business owners, mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers. Yesterday, I saw a JDC volunteer helping an elderly woman to get from our welcome tent at the Romanian border to the bus that was waiting for her to take her to the hostel. She was struggling to walk. He was carrying her one plastic bag, and the entire time he kept saying, "You're a champion, you can do it. You're a champion, you can do it." And every time he said that, she smiled. Thank you for making that work possible. Thank you for making her smile. Thank you for standing with us, shoulder to shoulder.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex and Gideon. You certainly painted a picture for us in terms of the kind of work that the JDC is doing, supported by federations across the country. And really, we just wish you the best, because everything that you do ends up strengthening the Jewish people, and it's really putting Jewish values into action. The Jewish Agency for Israel is another of Canadian Federation's prime partners. And Roman Polonsky, who's the regional director for the FSU, the former Soviet Union, and Central and Eastern Europe for the Jewish Agency for Israel, is with us. Roman is a veteran of this kind of life-saving work we see going on in Ukraine and on its borders today. And Roman will speak about the work of the Jewish Agency. And Roman, in addition, if I could ask you, please speak about the level of cooperation between the Jewish Agency and JDC, working really as a blanket in terms of the kind of support offered to Jews inside Ukraine and on its borders.
Absolutely, Stephen. And thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you for your long-standing support, commitment, partnership, which is so important, especially in these days. I'm speaking with you from Budapest, several hours after returning from the border, where we picked up 20 refugees from Ukraine, and we brought them to the safety in our facilities in Budapest. The most striking picture of all what is going on now is split families. We see these families which are divided by this regulation in Ukraine. According to this regulation, men ages 18-60, they have to stay in the country and they have to fight. And that's why we see mostly women with children, women with their elderly parents, women with cats, dogs, 2 baskets, and I call it women's and children's exodus. These women, they're crossing the country from east to the west, sometimes in trains where supposed to be in one car only 40 people, and instead of it, there are 400 people. 36 hours, they cannot sit, they only stand there. They don't have water, they don't have toilet. And then they come to the border and they stand on the border, on this border crossings for 10 hours, and then they cross the border. Our role is to help them, to ease their plight, and we are doing it by opening our hotline, and Adam spoke about this. We have about 30,000 calls in this hotline, and we try to identify people where they are in these cities, in Kharkov, in Kherson, in Nikolaev, in Dnipro, in Kiev. We are in touch with Jewish leaders in these communities, with rabbis. We organize buses for them together with JDC, with Chabad, with local organizations, and more than 300 buses went during this time from the cities to the border, bringing people to the safety. It's not an easy task. There is no many available buses right now, and not many drivers want to enter the city and risk their lives. There are huge traffic jams, and there is not enough gas stations. Actually, there are gas stations, but not enough gas in these stations. So just to bring them to this border is a huge task that we take on ourselves. And for this task, we established in Troskovets, which is in western Ukraine, we established a base with 1,000 beds, and people who come from the east of the country to the west, they spend their night and then they go to the border. And in the border, this is a main task, which is to bring them to our facilities and to connect them to consuls who give them these visas to Israel. And this is not an easy thing because they fled, as Alex very rightly pointed out, they fled without anything. And many of them, they don't have these documents. For example, children, they don't have international passports, and we have somehow to solve this problem, giving them laissez-passer. Actually, Embassy of Israel give them laissez-passer, this one-time crossing the border document that give them the right to go to cross the border and then to go to Israel. There are so many people here, and we are trying to ease their lives, giving the opportunity to those who don't have all the documents to go to Israel, just pointing out that they have relative in Petach Tikva or in other places or in Rishon LeZion, and then we know that there is a connection to Jewish people, and we give them green light. It is called Aliyah Express. They go to Israel, and in Israel they can conclude their journey. And so far, approximately 5,000 new Olim went to Israel. Every day we have flights from the border, from this country where we are deployed, and we are deployed in 4 countries, in Romania, Moldova, Hungary, and Poland, with more than 50 our own employees and emissaries, and more than 100 volunteers. And speaking about volunteers, I want to thank Canadian Jewry for a special gift that we received from you, from Canada, by Orly Naim. Orly Naim, she is a citizen of Vancouver. And she called me one day and she told me, I want to come and to volunteer here in Budapest. And I asked her, do you speak Russian? She told me, yes, I speak Russian, I speak Hebrew, and I speak English. And I told her, oh, that's excellent, come. But we have to buy a ticket for you in advance. She told me, no, I am buying a ticket and I'm doing my insurance and I am coming. Now she's here, she's helping. This is a great help for all of us. She is here for 3 weeks. She replaced her 3 weeks vacation on Pesach, on Passover, for 3 weeks volunteering here in Budapest. And she told me, I asked her, what about your children? You have 3 children. She told me, I have my husband. Husband will deal with these children. And then just today, she told me, I'm here for a week. There are 2 weeks more that I'm here, but I cannot leave because I'm needed here. I have to be here. So thank you, Canadian jury, for giving us this very important help. It's not only about finance, it's not only about the funds, it's very important, but it's about unity, about your Jewish warm heart, and we can feel it here. Thank you for this. And speaking about cooperation and partnership with JDC, this is something unique that we see all over the borders, all over this work that we are doing. There is no petty politics. There is no kind of credit for this organization or this organizations. I have personal, very tight relationship with Stefan, Oscar, and Shira Gainish, who are heads of JDC in the former Soviet Union. Our shlichim on the field, they all the time coordinate their work with JDC. And now it's not about who are making Aliyah and who is not making Aliyah. This is about who can first give the hand to these people, to help them. And we all the time trying to understand how we can be more helpful. So again, thank you so much for your partnership, for your commitment. And it's something that gives us strength and ability to work here on the field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roman, for ending on that note of cooperation. And it's times like these that bring Jewish unity. It's federations that are really focused on Jewish unity, as are the Joint Distribution Committee, JDC, and the Jewish Agency. And you spoke, Roman, eloquently about that volunteer from Vancouver. And really, if we look at our organizations, be it the federations or JDC or the Jewish Agency and Keren HaYesod, I will speak about in a moment, all these organizations are a partnership, not just between each other, among each other, but also a partnership between professionals like yourself and volunteer lay leaders. And we have many active leading members of JDC, the Jewish Agency, and Keren HaYesod across Canada, including members of the boards of those organizations. And just speaking about your work, for example, on the Board of Governors and as chair of the Aliyah Committee, which is so important right now of the Jewish Agency, we have Bruce Lieboff serving from Canada. Keren HaYesod works in partnership with the Jewish Agency, and Keren HaYesod is the global fundraising arm. And the Jewish Agency that Roman was speaking about a moment ago is really the executing arm in terms of doing the work of world Jewry in relation to the areas Roman spoke about. I'd like to introduce Sam Grunberg, who's with us. Sam is the world chairman of Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, which operates fundraising campaigns in over 40 countries and 60 communities. And our federations across Canada are affiliated with Keren HaYesod. Prior to his role at Keren HaYesod, Sam served as Consul General of Israel in Los Angeles and as Director General in Israel for the World Jewish Congress. He's an attorney who worked in major international law firms prior to joining Keren HaYesod. And recently, Sam visited the Ukrainian border in Poland and will speak about his firsthand experiences and about the tremendous way the Jewish world's rallying, as we are here in Canada, to assist Jews fleeing from the terrible crisis in Ukraine. And following Sam's speaking, we'll also hear from Diana Buchman, who Sam will speak about and will be introduced by a video, and she escaped the war in Ukraine recently. So Sam, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you for having me. And I also want to start by thanking all of the participants on this call and the entire UIA, all of the Canadian federations, and all of you for your leadership and for your support. And I only have a couple of precious minutes, and there's so much to say, and I don't want to repeat. I want to try to complement and supplement what's already been said, but I would be remiss if I did not say a word about Julia Koshitsky. Stephen, you very correctly described her as regal. I was talking to somebody yesterday and tried in 2 or 3 words to explain from a Keren HaYesod perspective, and that's what I said. I said she's Keren HaYesod royalty. I returned a few hours ago, had the privilege and the honor, as difficult as it was to attend and participate in her funeral, and I just returned from the Shiva in Jerusalem just a few minutes ago, actually, and for not just for Keren HaYesod, certainly for the entire Canadian Jewish community and community at large, but really for the entire global Jewish community and the Jewish people in the state of Israel. It's just a tremendous loss. As Stephen mentioned, and you heard from the others, Keren HaYesod, our role as a national institution, together with our strategic partner, the Jewish Agency for Israel, in our role as being the global fundraising arm, not just for the Jewish Agency, but for the Zionist enterprise outside of the United States. We certainly, especially given the dire humanitarian crisis that you've heard about taking place in Ukraine, we in the Keren HaYesod world are working around the clock in our 60 or so campaigns, about 45 countries, which of course includes Canada, and are working hard to help rescue Jews and support the efforts to bring them on Aliyah. And I can tell you that if anyone has ever questioned the relevance of the national institutions and why it is that we're still needed after Israel is in existence now for almost 74 years, and these institutions like Keren HaYesod, which has been around now for 101 years, and the Jewish Agency about 92 years, I think just in the last couple of weeks, we have clearly been providing exclamation marks and answers as to why we are so needed and why we are so relevant. For a lot of this work, especially bringing these refugees on Aliyah, we are really the only ones who can do that. And as Roman described also, it is amazing to see the different agencies, the different organizations working together, really in concert, everybody kind of staying in their lane and working together. And I can tell you that in our efforts, we have 30 shlichim around the world in Keren HaYesod in those 60 or so campaigns focused on this emergency campaign. Besides the numbers that you heard Stephen mention in Canada, I think it was 7.2 million Canadian in Canada. In the Keren HaYesod world, we have raised well over $13 million US. That does not count the Canadian portion. And of course, we continue with all of our efforts. The needs, to talk about numbers for a moment, the needs, at least as communicated by the Jewish Agency, stand at over $85 million US. And of course, that number is growing as the situation continues to evolve. Keren HaYesod, among others, participates in what's called the Aliyah Cabinet, which is run by the Minister of Aliyah and many other ministers. In one of the meetings that I participated in a couple of meetings ago, it was actually, since it's so important and pressing, it was actually run by the Prime Minister, by Prime Minister Bennett. And Roman mentioned the number of Olim that have already come through, over 5,000 or so. There are many thousands that are in the pipeline, so to speak, at those transit centers that were spoken about. So I had the opportunity to visit last week. Roman was one of the Jewish Agency top professionals who hosted us, And we also had a chance to visit along the border, to visit and see, and there you see a picture that's exactly at the border between Ukraine and Poland. And as was mentioned, you see almost exclusively women and young children that are coming across. And it's really heartbreaking because, as was mentioned, you know that these are not whole family units, but these families are torn apart with the men staying behind. Had a chance to visit the transit centers that the Jewish Agency runs with the Fast Track Aliyah Center. Here you see a picture with just heartbreaking, and which really illustrates the human tragedy of it. Just beds and cots as far as the eye can see. This was in a rundown, or what used to be a shopping center that was just taken over and turned into a refugee center. And Israel is talking about a possible aliyah wave of up to 100,000. It's important to understand the numbers and to understand the needs, because that's what we're doing here together, is working on raising the resources. Nobody knows, of course, exactly, but they're talking about a possible wave of up to 100,000 in the coming months, not just from Ukraine, but also from Russia. Adam mentioned about Russia and the real peak that we see in interest in Aliyah from there. And so these are the needs that all of us globally and together with your leadership in Canada are trying to address. And it's been said before by the leadership in Israel and by the Jewish leadership. We are not going to turn anyone away. If there's anyone, Jews around the world that desire to come and that need to come and to escape where they are, we will rally together to raise those funds necessary, and that's what we're going to do. And so, the trip, just to end on this, and then I'll introduce the next speaker. I had a chance to meet with an elderly couple that was rescued by the efforts of our partners and with our funding just the night before. And this is the couple you'll see, and her husband was a Holocaust survivor, about to turn 90. And he told me with such great pride how he was so excited that he was going to be in Israel for his 90th birthday. And it's difficult in words to describe the feeling, looking somebody like that in the eye and shaking their hands, having gone through what they went through. And I would just say that the needs are great, but I know that based on what I've seen in our campaigns around the world, based on what I've heard about what you have done in Canada, the various federations, it's awe-inspiring. And we know that even though the challenges are great, that we'll be able to rise to the occasion. And we just celebrated Purim, and of course we all know that moving moment where Mordechai says to Esther, to paraphrase, and telling her to encouraging her to stand up and to show leadership and to act, saying that this is the reason why God put you in the position that you're in a place of royalty. And I truly believe that for all of us in our respective organizations, in the local leadership, the federations, the Jewish Agency, Keren HaYesod, our national institutions, everything that went in with the decades of history of building us up into the structure that we're in today is to put us in a position exactly to be able to act now and for moments like these. And the challenge for us is to stand up and to do that. So I want to end by thanking all of you, thanking for the leadership, the generosity in Canada, the partnership and working with us and our other partners in the Jewish Agency, and we look forward to working through this together. Stephen mentioned that you're going to see in a moment the story of Diana Buchman. Diana and her 2 children escaped the war in Ukraine and arrived in Israel just last week as new immigrants, thanks to the support of Keren HaYesod and the work of the Jewish Agency. And her story is a story of heartbreak, but also of her strength and her resilience and gratitude for all the support that she received. Diana worked in the Beit Grand Jewish Community Center in Odessa and recounts how her life in Ukraine as being a wonderful, full life, rich in Jewish culture. And she's here with us today to share her story. Take a look.
Odessa is such beautiful, such opening, such funny. You can't even imagine. My name is Diana Buchman. I'm 37 years old. I'm from Ukraine, Odessa. I have a great life, really great life. I have a good job in Beit Grant, GCC Beit Grant. All my life is normal, good Jewish life. And then I wake up from bombs. There is real war, like in old times. I understand that it can be not good. I know history. In Germany, Jewish have a normal life. Mama's mom and father's mom, like they was in a ghetto. So we know it, we remember it, we have it in the blood. We have bomb shelter, but it is like one street and one street. If it started, Sirena, okay, it started before, but to run one street, then another street, it can be уже time for bomb. Yes. So what to do?
Hi everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you for Carolyn Stott and Jewish Agency for doing everything to us, to all of us in this time. And this is really great things because we need it now. As you know, I was a principal of big Jewish volunteer center in Odessa, and I always give to people. And now I am in another side. I need a help. And what I see that the world like stand and help, it's great things. And my story is like beginning when I one day wake up from the bombs and understand that my world is finished, whole my world. I need to help people, I think so. But my parents have another idea, and they said that I need to take my children and run away. I want to stay, but they said that I'm a mother and I need to do this. And they found the opportunity to go away. It was Chesed. They take us because I work with them, and they pack me because I don't want to do nothing. And they pack me, and everything I know, I sit in the bus. Everything I know is that I'm going to Romania. That's all. Not what will be there, who will wait, what. I don't know nothing. I know only that we're going to Romania, me and my children and a lot of people with the bus. When I stand on the bus, the people said that I'm a leader and said that all questions will be to me. I think that I will sit on the bus and cry, but everybody start to ask where we're going, what we're gonna do. And I understand that it is my mission now to help them and start and motivate them, answer the questions, and it helped me not to come crazy. When my father go me to the bus, he said, remember, if something happen, you hear the bombs or shooting, you need to take your kids down and go on them. This is the last what say my father. between to stay in Odessa and go me to Romania. Yes, my parents stay in Ukraine, in Odessa, and they don't want to go, they want to stay. And I come to Romania, and Maccabi wait for us and give us like a hotel, and then Jewish agency take us, and we live in a good hotel. We have a consul which made us documents and everything. And now I am in Israel, but I need to start all my life from the beginning. I have everything. I have a good life. My kids go to Chabad school. I have work. I have a job. I have work which I love. I help people, and now people help me. So thank you for everything you do for us, because yes, I am young, I'm strong, but you see, I see a lot of people. I see such old people, such young people. I also see the children without parents. It's awful. It's unbelievable that now it's 21st century. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Caroline Sot. Thank you, Jewish Agency. Thank you for all what you do.
Diana, it's for us to thank you. Thank you for sharing your poignant story, and for, it's easy to think about thousands of people, and it sort of objectifies the fact that we're dealing with individual lives. So when we say tens of thousands, and it may be hundreds of thousands that we end up helping, it all comes down to the individual. And I think everybody here is thankful to you for putting a human face on what we're doing together, our federations, with our overseas partner, the Jewish Agency, helped by Keren HaYesod, and the JDC. Thank you, and we only pray for you to be reunited with all your loved ones in health and safety. Be well. And thank you very much, Sam, for talking about the work that you've been doing. Now, one last speaker in terms of information about what's happening with this crisis. And we're very fortunate to have Mark Regev, Ambassador Mark Regev, with us. Ambassador Regev is currently a visiting fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies. And most recently, Ambassador Regev was the Prime Minister of Israel's senior advisor for foreign affairs and international communications. Prior to this appointment, he served as Israel's ambassador to the United Kingdom from 2016 to 2020, and as the Prime Minister's advisor and international spokesperson from 2007 to 2016. I think we all remember Ambassador Regev on our screens during that time, because he became one of Israel's most prominent voices in the English-speaking world during that time. Ambassador Regev rose through the diplomatic corps, serving in Hong Kong and Beijing and Washington, D.C., and then with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jerusalem. Ambassador Regev, let me start with a question. The most common question I've received from my Federation colleagues across Canada is to try to bring an understanding of the complex position Israel is in relation to this conflict, and by extension, even that of the Jewish people. There's a lack of understanding as to how Israel's position might be different, or why, from, say, Canada's position officially on the conflict. So if you could start by elaborating on that, that would be wonderful.
Well, we have a very significant responsibility, and that is we are the homeland of the Jewish people. And so we have a job that maybe no other country has, in that we don't have to just look after our own nationals. And of course, there was a whole major effort to get the Israelis, Israeli citizens out, those who are in the Ukraine, to get them out safely. But we also have an overriding responsibility to Jews. And that's the Jewish community in the Ukraine, which is obvious. And you've been talking about the wonderful work that you've been doing there in the Ukraine, together with other organizations, together with the State of Israel. But also there's a Jewish community in Russia. And we know in times of war, we know in times of conflict, you can get more xenophobic nationalism. And we have to also be very conscious that we in Israel don't do anything that's going to put the Jewish community in Russia in danger. Now, that's a special responsibility. Canada doesn't have that responsibility. We have that responsibility. And so we have to calibrate our approach in a way that we can look after our people first and foremost. Now, if someone tells me up and says, well, Mark, you should be looking after everyone, I'd say, of course, I want to help everyone. But every country prioritizes its own. The Canadian government had a whole operation out to get Canadians safely out of the war zone. The French government, the same. The German government does the same. If Israel doesn't look after the Jews first, no one else will.
I think you've clearly defined the challenge for Israel and the particular challenge for Israel. We heard reports a couple of weeks ago of Prime Minister Bennett flying to Russia to meet with Putin and to play some sort of a mediation effort, if you will, between the parties, and Israeli officials have been doing so. Can you comment at all on that role, why the Prime Minister flew to Russia, and anything that you think might be productive coming from these efforts?
Well, the interesting thing, as I'm sure you know, is that he flew on Shabbat. Now, as a rule, Israeli prime ministers don't fly on Shabbat, and definitely this prime minister doesn't fly on Shabbat because he's an Orthodox Jew. And he could only do it because it was pikuach nefesh. You can break the Sabbath if it's to save lives. And he is trying to achieve a ceasefire that will end this conflict. Now, I don't want to overrate Israel's importance. We're a small country. But for all sorts of reasons, over the last couple of years, of all the countries in the Western world, and Israel is clearly, definitely part of the West, but of all the Western countries, we have a unique dialogue with the Kremlin. It's all because of what's going on in Syria for strategic reasons. We needed to talk to the Russians. And though we're clearly in the West, we're a partner of NATO, and we make no bones about it. If we have the ability to speak to the Russians and to speak to the Ukrainians and to try to bring a political solution, it's incumbent upon us to try to do so, even if at this stage it doesn't look very hopeful. But someone's got to keep the door open for diplomacy, because if this is going to end, if this terrible crisis in Ukraine is going to end, it's only going to end because of diplomacy. And I want to be clear here, the Ukrainian president has thanked Prime Minister Bennett for being out there trying to push forward a diplomatic solution. The American Secretary of State publicly thanked Israel for doing so. It's clear that we have Western support for what we're trying to do.
So the view from Jerusalem right now in terms of how this conflict may end or is likely to end, is there any different view from Jerusalem? And I know there's not some kind of unified view necessarily, but is there a particularly Israeli view on that?
No, we are, first of all, let's be clear, we're part of the West. At the United Nations, we condemned the Russian invasion, and my government has spoken very strongly about, that we think the Russians did the wrong thing. They shouldn't have gone into Ukraine, and we joined the international condemnation. At the same time, we are helping in two ways. And one way we're helping is through humanitarian support for the Ukrainian people. And I don't know if you know, but we opened yesterday a field hospital in the Ukraine. We're the only foreign government to do so. Israeli doctors, Israeli nurses, Israeli equipment, Israeli pharmaceuticals. We're operating in the Western Ukraine, a hospital of Israeli standards. There have been many cases in the past where we've had earthquakes or other natural disasters around the world, and Israel has sent teams in. So it's the same in the Ukraine. And we're trying to help the people there, and of course, dealing with people who want to leave and giving support to the refugees and all that. So we're giving strong humanitarian support, and we're also trying to give diplomatic support for a solution so this will end. Now, once again, I can't guarantee success. I can only guarantee a sincere effort. Now, there's not an Israeli plan here. It's not like that I have a secret document that's going to solve this crisis. What we're trying to do is mediate. And my prime minister is speaking almost on a daily basis with the leaders in Russia and the leaders in the Ukraine to see if it's possible to find common ground. We're not the only ones trying to mediate. The Turks, as you know, had a meeting of the two foreign ministers. They hosted the foreign ministers of Russia and the Ukraine, and we're trying to do the same. I think Prime Minister Bennett, though, is unique in that he's the only world leader who so far has actually gone to visit Putin and spoken to him face to face. And that's I think, very important.
Is Israel working, you mentioned Israel as part of the West. Is Israel working particularly closely in these efforts to mediate with any specific country or countries? I've noticed, for example, that Turkey, at least on their own accord, is stating their level of involvement. Is this helping at all in the relationship between Israel and Turkey? Are there any ancillary aspects of this that we should be aware of?
The most important people we're talking to, of course, is the Ukrainians, is President Zelensky, and of course with the Kremlin, the President Putin, because that's the most important thing. If there's going to be an end to this fighting, it's because those two leaders will say enough is enough and this is going to finish. And Israel's not going to express public support for any side of it. We just want this to be over. We'd like to see a negotiated solution because that's the only way to solve this issue. There's not going to be a military solution. Who we're talking to? We're talking to lots. If you mention Turkey, as you know, President Herzog was recently last week in Turkey. After many years of a very difficult relation with Turkey, there's a certain amount of hope. I don't want to overstate that. But you are correct in the question you ask. On the issue of Russia-Ukraine, there's a sort of convergence between the Turkish position and the Israeli position, which is actually interesting. Is that enough to open the door to a whole rapprochement between Ankara and Jerusalem? I'm not sure. I think we should be cautious, but you are correct in pointing because it's a very interesting development.
And Ambassador Regev, one last question. Is there any final piece of information or observation that you can share with the Canadian Jewish audience that you think they should have in mind, or we should have in mind, in terms of this conflict or the Jewish or Israeli interaction with this conflict?
I'll tell you what I don't like. And I've seen reporters do it. I've seen Israeli reporters do it. And sometimes Ukrainian leaders do it too. And of course, the Russians do it too. When people talk about the Holocaust and they bring it into this conflict. This conflict is terrible. This conflict is too many innocent people have been killed. But it's not the Holocaust. And I heard someone on the radio, an Israeli, talking about how he sees the refugees arriving in trains and it reminds him of the 1940s. Sorry. Anyone who abuses the Holocaust and the memory of the 6 million that way is simply not telling the truth. Just as when the Soviet Union invaded Hungary in 1956 and many innocent people were killed, it wasn't the Holocaust. Just as when the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia in '68, it wasn't the Holocaust. When the United States invaded Iraq and many innocent civilians were killed, that's not the Holocaust. People should be very careful with their language because the Holocaust, I'm the son of a survivor. No one at the moment is taking Ukrainians, taking them on trains and sending them to extermination camps. And we can talk about the suffering, and we can talk about people dying, and we can talk about the need to end this quickly. And this is a terrible conflict, it's a terrible war, but it's not a Holocaust. I think Jewish people, more than anyone else, should be aware of that.
Thank you very, very much, Ambassador Regev, for joining us today and for imparting your expertise and wisdom in response to the terrible pictures we're seeing, and also giving some framework politically for the kind of relief efforts we're engaged in as federations across Canada with the JDC and with the Jewish Agency and Keren HaYesod to respond to really, as I said off the top, a humanitarian catastrophe. Thank you very much.
Can I just thank you and thank all the people who you represent? I think you're doing a wonderful work. I think it's very easy for people to watch the television and to say, oh, this is terrible. It's something very different to say, I'm doing something about it. And you're doing something about it. And your organization is doing something about it. And I think you can be proud of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, just to end our program today is Michael Frankel. Michael Frankel is from Montreal and has served for the last 3 years as chair of the board of Jewish Federations Canada, UIA. And I can tell you that Michael has worked tirelessly for the last 3 years. His term is almost complete and he'll hopefully get some rest. But Michael has been focused day in and day out on how we strengthen with the federations, the Jewish communities in Israel and overseas. And of course, the end of his term comes just as this terrible conflict begins, and Michael is there each and every day to help respond and lead as a volunteer. So Michael is going to reflect on what we've heard today what we're doing as federations and communities together with our partners. Michael, please.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks to all of our speakers today in this incredibly eye-opening program. You've provided insights to us on this crisis that we don't get through our marathon viewing of the media. I'm sure all of you who have now been with us have a better understanding of how and why our Jewish community is responding effectively, led by our federations and, of course, our overseas partners. To Linda Frum and to Adam Minsky, thank you for your personal views, your thoughts, your efforts on behalf of the Canadian community, especially with respect to your recent visits to the Ukrainian-Polish border. Importantly, it gave us a greater understanding of the irreplaceable role that our federations across Canada are playing to respond to this crisis, together with our partners. Our partners, thank you here on behalf of the American Joint Distribution Committee, Gideon Hersher and Alex Sklar. You left no doubt about your life-saving work for the Jewish people. Roman Polanski. Roman, okay, as the senior professional for the Jewish Agency for Israel with respect to the former Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, thank you for your tireless efforts. Stephen mentioned before that Bruce Lieboff from Toronto sits as chair of the Aliyah Committee for the Jewish Agency. I happen to be a member of the committee, and we have been getting briefings through Roman and others that are eye-opening, okay, and the efforts that are being made are quite incredible. I want to reiterate the fact that our partners are working together, complementarily to each other, along with, of course, our partner, and thank you, Sam Grunwald. Thank you, Sam Grunberg. The same can be said about you and your leadership in Karen Isla. Sam, it's a pleasure to know you and to deal with you over the years. Thank you for your tremendous efforts, okay, working alongside with the Jewish Agency and helping in the most important role of fundraising for these efforts. All of us, I guess, were both enthralled and I can't use the proper words to describe the emotions of hearing from Diana Buchman, to have heard from you, to talk about the help that you were giving to people in Odessa prior to receiving help yourself. You're the face of tens of thousands. We're relieved that you and your children are out of the danger zone, and we look forward to the day you are reunited with your loved ones. Last but not least, of course, thank you, Ambassador Regev. You have helped us understand a little bit better some of the geopolitical issues that are so important to our understanding what's going on. However, as we all know, tragically, human tragedy all starts and ends with things political. I especially appreciated your comments with respect to the overuse of comparisons to the Shoah. There was a Shoah, one Shoah. This is a terrible tragedy, but it's not a Holocaust. As chair of Jewish Federations Canada, UIA, I pray for an end to this conflict, as we all do. However, even if the hostilities were to end tomorrow, there are going to be weeks, months, and likely years of work ahead for all of us to make lives whole again, whether they're in the Ukraine, those who make Aliyah, or those in border states and in other countries. None of us will back away from our responsibilities. There's no higher calling, no higher honor for our board, for our professionals, our volunteers, and our community members than ensuring that the work that we do together with our federations are in the area of tikkun olam, save lives. We are putting Jewish values into action. Our current efforts in this crisis leaves no doubt that we are one Jewish people responsible for each other. Thank you all for joining with us. Thank you for your continued support.